Hello and a very warm welcome to France 24. You're watching live from Paris with me, Sanam Chantier, and the team. It's 2 p.m. in the French capital. Here are the headlines. Gunmen kidnap hundreds of students in a school attack in Nigeria. These incidents reflect the growing strength of criminal and jihadi groups and the weakness of the government's security system. The terrorism trial of Paul Rusesabagina starts this Wednesday. His supporters say the man who inspired the film Hotel Rwanda has no chance at a fair hearing. Also coming up on our programme at this hour, all eyes are on Libya's interim government as the country marks the 10-year anniversary of an uprising that led to the overthrow and eventual killing of longtime ruler Muammar Gaddafi. Thank you so much for watching live from Paris. We start with Nigeria this Wednesday, where gunmen stormed a school, killing one student and kidnapping hundreds of others. Now, it was not immediately clear who had taken them, while the militant group Boko Haram and a branch of the Islamic State group are active in the north of the country. Kidnappings by other armed groups, mostly for ransom, are also common. Now, this incident raises growing concerns about security and violence in the West African nation. For more on this story, let's bring in Armin Georgian, our international affairs editor. He joins us via Skype. Armin, good to have you with us. As I mentioned earlier, sadly, this is nothing new in Nigeria. In fact, kidnapping is very prevalent nationwide.
It's prevalent and it's big business. And unfortunately, kidnappings on this scale are not new. Just in December, 300 schoolboys were abducted. Of course, we all remember the notorious kidnapping of nearly 300 schoolgirls in 2014 at Chibok. But while that kidnapping was carried out by Boko Haram, the extremist Islamist group, this particular event today, according to officials in Nigeria, has been carried out by bandits, and that's how they've also described the more recent kidnappings, including the ones that I mentioned in December. Of course, as you know, Sanam, the line is quite blurred between criminality and jihad. So it's hard to know whether these particular criminals had something to do with the jihadi group or not. We don't know that for sure. At the moment, they're being described as bandits. But what we do know is that these gangs of bandits have become more brazen in recent months. They have been more prevalent in the central belt and in the northwest of the country. And of course, they have been targeting children because they're easy targets. They know that parents will be desperate to get their children back, which means that if money has to change hands for a ransom, well, parents are obviously going to say, well, yes, so be it, anything to get the children back. So emotionally, this is pretty easy target for the bandits. And of course, the fact that it works for some bandits, that encourages other groups of bandits to do the same with impunity.
I mean, you just mentioned these groups have become more brazen. Does this put more pressure on the government in Nigeria to respond to these increasing security challenges?
I mean, the government is certainly under pressure, and there have been protests by Nigerians who are saying, why is the government not able to provide security for the country? President Buhari has condemned these kidnappings, but to those who've been demonstrating, and probably to many other Nigerians, those verbal condemnations have sounded increasingly hollow. They want action. So back in December, for example, President Buhari urged Nigerians to be patient and fair, he said, as we deal with the challenges of security, the economy, and corruption. Well, for many people in villages, their patience has simply run out. They have turned to vigilantes to try to protect themselves because they really don't expect much from national security forces. And so they've had to, in a sense, take matters into their own hands.
Armin Georgian, thank you so much for that analysis on this common tactic among criminal and jihadi groups in Nigeria. Now, for the terrorism trial for Paul Rusesabagina, whose story inspired Hotel Rwanda, which starts this Wednesday, according to his supporters, the critic of longtime President Paul Kagame has no chance at a fair hearing and may die from poor health behind bars. The 66-year-old former hotelier was in exile and travelling in the UAE when he was mysteriously arrested and taken back to the landlocked country last year. For the latest on this trial, let's cross live to Simon Wolfart. Simon, what's the latest where you are?
I am not Rwandan. I'm a Belgian citizen who has been kidnapped, and I am a hostage here. It was with these words that Paul Rusesabagina addressed the judges who faced him today. Indeed, from the preliminary hearings, the opponents continued to assert that he was no longer Rwandan but Belgian, and that therefore he had nothing to do in a Rwandan court. A ground which is inadmissible according to the prosecution, which considers that Paul Rusesabagina is Rwandan by birth. The opponent's lawyer, Gatera Gashabana, also defended the fact that Paul Rusesabagina had not been legally extradited, and that therefore the file should be transferred to Belgium. The opponent appeared alongside 20 other defendants, including Calixte Nsabimana, alias Sankara, spokesperson of the FLN, the armed wing of the MRCD, the opposition platform of which Paul Rusesabagina is a member. The FLN, considered a terrorist by Kigali, claimed responsibility for several attacks on Rwandan soil in 2018, which Rwandan authorities said made 9 civilians victims. Paul Rusesabagina faces 9 counts, including terrorism.
Simon Wolfart reporting there from Kigali. Turning our attention to Libya, which marks its 10th anniversary of the start of the uprising that toppled longtime ruler Muammar Gaddafi. While this revolt ended decades of dictatorship, it also threw the country into violent chaos. Now, over in the capital this Wednesday, there were festivities, but in the east, which has had a separate government for years, the mood was rather somber. Meanwhile, all eyes are on a recently appointed government, which is tasked with leading the country through elections late this year. Let's take a listen to this report from our correspondent, Catherine Norris-Trent, who is in Tripoli this Wednesday.
People here in Tripoli are starting to flock down here to Martyrs Square at the heart of the Libyan capital for a day of celebrations organised by the authorities here to mark the 10th anniversary of the start of the uprising that eventually toppled Muammar Gaddafi. And so far, there's a fair number of people coming out, and we've been speaking to those in the crowds, and they're saying, many of them, they're trying to remain optimistic, that they're hoping a new page will soon be turned in Libya's history. But at the same time, a lot of them remaining very cautious, of course, because they've been through 10 years of on and off turmoil, of civil war, of violence, kidnappings, factionalism, armed groups ruling the roost, and the country being divided between East and West. So many people here, this remains a bittersweet anniversary. They hope for better times for the future, but at the same time been telling us of loved ones they lost. And one man we spoke to, who one of his sons was killed in 2015 in one of the bouts of fighting, and we asked him whether if he could turn back the clock 10 years and do things over again, whether he would still support the revolution, and he said honestly that he wouldn't. So, there's a time of people trying to remain optimistic, but a certain sense of nostalgia for stabler times in the past, albeit clearly under the dictatorship of Muammar Gaddafi.
Also this Wednesday, NATO defence ministers are meeting for their first talk since Joe Biden took office last month. On the agenda, the future of the 72-year-old military alliance, as well as a decision concerning the remaining forces in Afghanistan and Iraq. Other challenges will also need attention during this 2-day virtual conference. They include the Russian and Chinese threats. Now to Myanmar, which witnessed one of its largest demonstrations this Wednesday. Hundreds of thousands flocked to the streets to protest the military's seizure of power. They say they will not be cowed despite an increasing number of arrests. Now, according to Human Rights Watch, 326 people, at least that is, have been detained since the coup. Meanwhile, the lawyer representing democracy hero Aung San Suu Kyi, also arrested, said he is preparing for the worst, and the trial he fears could take 6 months.
Every day, Myanmar's people are coming up with a new way of getting their message across. Now it's the turn of commuters and taxi drivers who brought traffic to a standstill in downtown Yangon by blocking major streets. In open defiance of the ruling military junta, the city was the scene of a mass rally as protesters sought to discredit claims by the army that there was public support for the coup. Across Myanmar, a steady build-up of troops has been taking place in recent days, a clear attempt to scare protesters off the streets. But many have responded to calls on social media platforms to hold demonstrations. In response, the army has repeatedly pulled the plug on the internet to stop activists organising themselves. The UN is warning that events could spiral out of control.
I fear that Wednesday has the potential for violence on a greater scale in Myanmar than we have seen since the illegal takeover of the government on February 1st.
With Aung San Suu Kyi still detained, protests don't look like dying down anytime soon. She's now accused of breaking a law that has been used to prosecute those who violated coronavirus restrictions. Activists say the move is an army ploy to hold her indefinitely without trial.
Andrea Hillier with that update. This Wednesday, South Africa has kicked off its inoculation campaign. The first Johnson & Johnson shot was given to the country's health workers. This comes after pausing a rollout of the AstraZeneca jab earlier this month. In fact, government officials have said that they do have plans to share 1 million doses of this treatment with other countries across the continent. Sad Brad Peace sent us this update.
South Africa's vaccination programme has finally begun. 80,000 doses of the Johnson & Johnson vaccine arriving in Johannesburg on Tuesday, now being distributed to vaccination centres across the country. The government says that frontline health workers are the priority when it comes to inoculation, but the president himself, Cyril Ramaphosa, and the country's health minister are both to receive jabs, and this is to show their confidence in the new vaccine in preventing illness arising from coronavirus. Just last week, the initial rollout of vaccines was delayed after doubts arose over the efficacy of the AstraZeneca vaccine in preventing illness arising from the 501YV2 variant, the new particularly contagious strain of coronavirus discovered here in South Africa. There have been more than 48,000 officially recorded COVID deaths in the country so far, and so really the arrival of this Johnson & Johnson vaccine could not have come at a better time.
Up next to the United Arab Emirates and a story that has had global reverberations. On Tuesday, according to a BBC documentary, a daughter of Dubai's billionaire ruler has appeared in secret recordings claiming she's being held hostage. In this video, Sheikha Latifa says, "Every day I'm worried about my safety and my life. I don't really know if I'm going to survive this situation." The 35-year-old initially drew headlines back in 2018 when she unsuccessfully sought to flee her country. France 24's Brian Quinn brings us up to speed.
From a childhood of luxury in one of the world's richest ruling families to a harrowing ordeal in captivity. In undated videos aired by the BBC Tuesday, Sheikha Latifa of Dubai says she's a prisoner in her own country.
I'm a hostage, and this villa has been converted into a jail. All the windows are barred shut. I can't open any window. I've been by myself, solitary confinement.
35-year-old Latifa is the 21st of 30 children fathered by the ruler of Dubai and vice president of the United Arab Emirates, Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum. In 2018, Latifa attempted to flee the emirate by boat. She was recaptured off the coast of India by commandos and forcibly returned. In a pre-recorded video released after her capture, she explained her reasons for leaving, accusing her father of mistreating her and one of her sisters. Latifa's friend and fitness instructor helped her in the 2018 escape attempt. She and other supporters released the latest secretly recorded videos after growing fearful for the princess's safety when they stopped receiving messages from her. Dubai is one of the Arab world's foremost success stories. Sheikh Mohammed frequently rubbing shoulders with European leaders and British royalty, but he's faced criticism abroad over women's rights. In 2019, his ex-wife, Haya bint al-Hussein, fled to London, where a British judge ruled that she had been the victim of intimidation by Sheikh Mohammed.